A girl lives isolated in a mansion, marked by scars and silence. The new employee realizes that something in that house doesn't make sense. Over time, she uncovers dark secrets hidden behind appearances, and when the truth explodes, no one escapes the consequences. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us which city you're watching us from. Let's continue. I promise this will be the best story you'll ever hear. The Albright Manor was the pride of the Kensington Gardens neighborhood in London. Imposing with its 3 stories of modern architecture and meticulously maintained gardens, it hid behind its glass and concrete walls secrets that no facade could disguise. On the 3rd floor, isolated from the world for 3 years, lived Sophia, a 10-year-old girl whose face bore the marks of a terrible fire. The scars on her right cheek were not, however, as deep as those she carried in her heart. Silence was a constant presence in the pink room, a space that looked more like a museum of memories than a child's refuge. Since the accident that consumed part of the manor and left her mother, Clarice, in a vegetative state in a private clinic, Sophia rarely left that environment. Expensive, untouched toys accumulated on shelves, gifts from an absent father who tried to compensate for the emotional void with objects. Richard Albright, one of the country's most influential businessmen in the pharmaceutical sector, had become a shadow of his former self. He immersed himself in endless meetings and business trips, fleeing the ghost of what his family once was. In his absence, the house was managed by Deborah Mitchell, his current fiancée, a former model in her early 30s, whose beauty, sculpted by plastic surgery, concealed a calculating coldness. "Sophia, dear, dinner is served," Deborah announced, tapping lightly on the door, without truly expecting a response. The girl remained seated by the window, watching the city that pulsed outside, as distant as the stars. Her small, pale fingers absent-mindedly touched the scars on her face. "I'm not hungry," she replied, without looking away from the urban landscape. Deborah sighed, a rehearsed sigh that conveyed more impatience than concern. "Your father called. He said he's returning from his trip on Sunday. He asked me to remind you about your medicine." The mention of Richard made Sophia turn her face slightly. 3 years of treatments, surgeries, and therapies had not been enough for her father to look at her without averting his gaze, as if in her he saw not only the scars but the guilt he carried. The manor, rebuilt after the fire, maintained the same layout, with the exception of the east wing, where Clarice's old laboratory was located. That area remained closed, sealed like a time capsule. Richard had never allowed its reconstruction, as if he wanted to encapsulate the tragedy in that space. The next morning, the sound of movement in the corridor awakened Sophia's curiosity. Different voices, one of them unfamiliar, echoed through the usually silent space. "You will be responsible for cleaning the rooms and assisting with meals. The girl rarely leaves her room, so don't worry too much about her," Carmen, the housekeeper, said in her typical authoritative tone. "I understand, madam. I will do my best," a calm and melodious voice replied, with a Cornish accent. Sophia slightly opened the door and peeked into the corridor. A woman of approximately 40, with curly hair pulled back in a simple bun and olive skin, listened attentively to the housekeeper's instructions. There was something in her gaze, a mix of dignity and compassion, that immediately caught the girl's attention. "This is Mrs. Irene Oliver, the new employee," Carmen introduced when she noticed Sophia partially hidden. "And this is Sophia Albright, the boss's daughter." Irene smiled gently, showing no surprise or pity upon seeing the girl's scars. "Nice to meet you, Sophia. You can call me Irene, if you prefer." There was something different about that woman. It wasn't just the lack of pity in her gaze, but a kind of recognition, as if she understood the pain beyond the visible marks. Over the following weeks, Sophia secretly watched Irene as she cleaned the nearby rooms. The employee hummed softly songs from her homeland, Cornwall, and sometimes told stories aloud as if she knew she was being watched. She spoke of the St. Ives Sea, of the legends of the Moors, and of the strength of the women in her family. One day, as Sophia was leafing through an old storybook, she dropped it just as Irene was passing through the corridor. The employee picked up the object and, instead of simply returning it, sat on the floor in the corridor. "This was my favorite when my daughter was little," she commented, pointing to the illustration of a mermaid. "She used to say she would one day swim as deep as they did." "You have a daughter?" Sophia asked, the first direct question she had asked anyone in months. A veil of sadness passed over Irene's face, so quickly it was almost imperceptible. I do. Her name is Julia. She is far away now. That answer, laden with unspoken meanings, created an invisible bond between the two. Sophia approached and also sat on the floor, breaking the physical barrier she maintained with the world. That night, for the first time in 3 years, Sophia dreamed of the fire. Confused fragments emerged in her mind, her mother screaming that something wasn't safe, the heat of the flames licking the corridors, and strong arms carrying her away from the smoke. She woke up startled, sweating coldly, trying to piece together the fragments of that incomplete memory. Deborah, noticing the growing closeness between the employee and her stepdaughter, began to show dissatisfaction. One afternoon, while Richard was participating in a video conference in his office, she stealthily entered. "Darling, I've noticed Sophia is very attached to the new employee," she commented, adjusting her posture to appear concerned. "I don't think it's healthy. The girl needs friends her own age, not a maid." Richard, without taking his eyes off the computer screen, murmured something inaudible. Deborah interpreted it as agreement and continued, "I've been thinking perhaps it's time to consider that boarding school in Ascot. The environment would be great for her recovery, away from painful memories." The businessman finally looked up, weary. "Sophia has been through a lot of trauma, Deborah. I don't know if separating her from this family environment would be beneficial right now." "Family?" Deborah let out a bitter laugh. "She lives locked in that room. She'll never get over the trauma if she continues like this. Besides, the foundation needs you present and with Sophia here." The Clarice Albright Foundation, established after the accident to research new treatments for patients in a vegetative state, was the project that consumed any of Richard's free time. It was also his way of atoning for the guilt of the accident that claimed his wife and scarred his daughter. "I'll think about it," he replied, ending the conversation. The next morning, as Irene tidied Sophia's room, the girl noticed something she hadn't seen before. A small scar at the base of the employee's neck, partially covered by her uniform. "Did you get burned too?" she asked, with the frankness typical of children. Irene froze for an instant, her hand instinctively covering the mark. "Yes, a long time ago. Fire leaves its marks on all of us, in one way or another," she replied, with a distant gaze. "But it's the invisible scars that hurt the most, isn't it?" Sophia nodded, feeling understood as never before. For the first time since the accident, she had found someone who seemed to see beyond the marks on her face, someone who saw the girl hidden behind the scars. "You know, Sophia," Irene continued, carefully folding a blouse, "in Cornwall we have a saying, 'What fire doesn't burn, the wind doesn't carry away.' It means there are things that even the greatest tragedies cannot destroy. Truth is one of them." Those words echoed in the girl's mind, like an enigma to be deciphered. What truths had the fire failed to consume? And why did she feel that Irene knew more about that night than she let on? At the end of that day, Sophia watched from the window as Irene left the manor. The employee paused for a moment at the gate, looked up, directly at Sophia's window, and gave a small wave. A simple gesture that carried a silent promise. "You are no longer alone." The girl returned the wave, feeling for the first time in 3 years that there might be a way out of the silence that imprisoned her. A path that began with trusting someone who, like her, carried visible and invisible scars. Across the corridor, Deborah observed the scene with calculating eyes. She picked up her phone and quickly dialed a number. "I need you to investigate someone for me," she said in a low voice. "Irene Oliver. There's something about this woman that doesn't seem right to me, and we need to act fast." The days at Albright Manor began to take on a new rhythm. Sophia, little by little, allowed Irene to enter not only her room, but her solitary world. The employee brought with her not only cleaning supplies, but stories, and a welcoming presence that the girl hadn't experienced since her mother was hospitalized. On a rainy afternoon in June, as the London sky turned a grey canvas, the two were sitting on the rug in the room. Irene was teaching Sophia how to make small rag dolls, a tradition she had learned from her grandma Daisy in Cornwall. "My grandma Daisy used to say that each doll carries a piece of the soul of the person who makes it," Irene explained, guiding Sophia's small hands through the simple stitches. "Look, this will be your dream guardian." Sophia watched attentively the woman's skillful fingers, which transformed scraps into art. "Did you make dolls with your daughter too?" she asked, still cautious about mentioning Julia, a name she had perceived as delicate territory. Irene smiled, a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Yes, we did. Julia had a special talent, you know. She could bring each doll to life. Then she started getting interested in science, in laboratories. Her voice faltered for a moment. But she never stopped keeping the dolls we made together. Thunder echoed in the distance, making Sophia instinctively flinch. Irene noticed the gesture and, without asking, moved a little closer, offering silent reassurance. The noise reminds me of the fire, Sophia confessed, surprising herself with her frankness. Sometimes I dream of that night, but it's all confused, pieces that don't fit together. Irene gently tucked a strand of hair behind the girl's ear. The mind has its own time to organize difficult memories, my dear, don't force it. When you're ready, the pieces will fit. There was something in Irene's gaze, an enigmatic certainty, that made Sophia wonder once again how much that woman truly knew about the fire that had changed her life. In the Manor's main living room, Richard and Deborah were receiving Dr. Frederick Miller, the neurologist in charge of Clarice's case. Her condition remains stable, Mr. Albright, the doctor explained, leafing through a report. The latest tests show small responses to stimuli, but nothing conclusive. Richard rubbed his face, visibly weary. 3 years, doctor. 3 years without significant changes. Science advances, sir. The Foundation's experimental treatments show promising results in similar cases. We cannot lose hope. Deborah, elegantly seated in an Italian leather armchair, interjected, "But surely there's a limit, isn't there, doctor? How long can we keep—" She searched for the right word. "How long can we maintain this situation beneficially for everyone?" The doctor gave her a stern look. "Mrs. Mitchell, as long as there is brain activity and the family wishes to continue treatment, our duty is to proceed." The discussion was interrupted by the sound of something falling upstairs. Richard automatically stood up. "Sophia," he murmured, quickly ascending the stairs. He found his daughter sitting on the floor in the corridor with several books scattered around her. Irene was kneeling, helping her gather the materials. "What happened here?" he asked, trying to maintain a neutral tone, but letting the tension show. "Pardon me, sir," Irene replied promptly. "The girl wanted some books from the library, and I was helping her carry them." Sophia, who rarely addressed her father, surprised everyone. "They're Mum's books, about botany. I wanted to see her notes." Richard observed the old volumes, recognizing Clarice's delicate handwriting in the margins. Clarice Albright had been a respected researcher before the accident, specializing in the development of medicines derived from Amazonian plants. "Clarice was always meticulous in her notes," he commented, with a melancholy smile, bending down for the first time in a long time to his daughter's level. "She would be happy to know you're interested in her work." For a brief moment, father and daughter shared a look of mutual recognition. Irene observed discreetly, perceiving the importance of that small miracle. "I have a meeting now, but—" Richard seemed to search for words. "Perhaps we can have dinner together tonight. The 3 of us." He included Deborah, who watched the scene from the top of the stairs with an indecipherable expression. Sophia merely nodded, surprised by the invitation. That night, dinner was a strange experience for everyone. The large oak table, normally only partially occupied, hosted the 3 in an awkward silence. Richard tried to initiate conversations. Deborah responded in monosyllables, and Sophia watched the two like someone watching a foreign film without subtitles. "I thought about visiting your mother on Sunday," Richard said, breaking another long silence. "Would you like to come with me?" Sophia raised her eyes from her plate, genuinely surprised. It had been months since her last visit to the clinic. Visits had become increasingly infrequent, as seeing her mother motionless, connected to machines, was too painful. "Can I bring one of the dolls I made with Irene?" she asked hesitantly. Before Richard could answer, Deborah interjected, "Sophia, dear, I don't think it's appropriate to bring rag toys to a clinic. A matter of hygiene, you understand?" The girl lowered her gaze again, feeling reprimanded. Richard, however, surprised his fiancée. "I think it would be a perfect gift. Clarice would love it." Deborah shifted in her chair, uncomfortable with the opposition. "By the way, Richard," she changed the subject, "we need to discuss this new employee. There's something about her that doesn't inspire confidence in me." Sophia clutched her fork tightly, suddenly alert. "What do you mean?" Richard asked, pouring himself more wine. "I asked the agency about her background, and there are gaps. where she worked in recent years, inconsistent references. Deborah took a sip of water, calculating her next words. Considering everything we've been through, we cannot be too careful about whom we bring into our home. Richard stared at his fiancée for a few seconds. Carmen has never reported any problems. On the contrary, it seems Sophia is finally opening up a bit. So I see no reason for concern. The conversation was interrupted when Sophia abruptly excused herself to leave. The girl hurried up the stairs as if fleeing an invisible fire. That night, while everyone slept, Sophia was awakened by a strange sound. It seemed like muffled crying, coming from the staff quarters in the annex of the house. Following her instinct, the girl silently went down the service stairs until she reached the corridor leading to the staff's quarters. She stopped in front of Irene's door and clearly heard, "Forgive me, Julia, forgive me," the woman murmured amidst sobs. Sophia hesitated, her small hand resting on the doorknob. She decided not to enter, but those tormented words confirmed her suspicions. Irene carried a deep pain related to her daughter, a pain that somehow seemed connected to her own story. The next day, Irene appeared with deep, dark circles under her eyes, but the same gentle smile as always. As she tidied Sophia's bed, she noticed a drawing on the desk, a woman and a girl holding hands with flames in the background. "It's beautiful," she commented, studying the drawing carefully. "I dreamed of the fire again," Sophia explained. "But this time, someone was carrying me out. It wasn't my father. It was a woman." Irene picked up the drawing with slightly trembling hands. "Memories are strange, aren't they? Sometimes we need time to see what had always been there. Irene," Sophia rarely used the shortened name, "you've been here before, haven't you? Before being hired as a cleaner?" The direct question made Irene freeze. Before she could answer, they were interrupted by Deborah, who entered the room without knocking. "Sophia, your father needs to speak with you," she announced, casting a suspicious glance at Irene. "And you, when you're done here, Carmen wants to see you in the laundry room." When the girl left, Deborah closed the door and approached the employee with an intimidating posture. "I don't know what game you're playing, but I suggest you keep your distance from the girl. Your job is to clean the house, not form bonds." Irene maintained her dignified posture, meeting the other woman's gaze. "With all due respect, madam, Sophia needs affection, someone who sees beyond the scars. Listen carefully." Deborah lowered her tone, moving even closer. "I know your type. You think you can get close to the family, gain trust, and then who knows? A better job? Money? I won't allow it." "You judge me by your own standards," Irene replied without averting her gaze. "My only interest is the girl's well-being." A dangerous glint passed through Deborah's eyes. "You don't know who you're dealing with. If you continue like this, I guarantee your stay in this house will be very brief." In the library, Richard was explaining to Sophia about an unexpected business trip. "A problem arose with our investors in Edinburgh. I need to resolve it personally," he said, tidying papers in his briefcase. "I'll be back in a week. In the meantime, Deborah will take care of everything." Sophia nodded in silence, accustomed to her father's absences. The news that truly affected her was the impossibility of the promised visit to her mother. "We can go when I get back," Richard promised, noticing the disappointment in his daughter's eyes. "Dad," Sophia gathered her courage, "do you remember who took me out of the fire?" The question seemed to hit Richard like a physical blow. He put down the documents and looked intently at his daughter. "Why are you asking that now?" "I've been dreaming. Memories coming back." Richard took a deep breath, running his hand through his graying hair. "I wasn't home that night, Sophia. When I arrived, the firefighters had already controlled the blaze. You were in the ambulance, unconscious. Your mother—" He swallowed hard. "Your mother had already been taken to the hospital." "But who took me out of the laboratory?" Sophia insisted. "The reports indicated it was one of the firefighters," Richard replied, avoiding her gaze. "Why does this matter now? The important thing is that you survived." Sophia noticed the evasiveness in her father's answer, but decided not to insist. Something told her that the truth was closer than she imagined, hidden in the unspoken silences of that house. Meanwhile, at the law firm in central London, Deborah was discreetly conversing with Paul Matthews, her private lawyer. "I want everything on this woman," she demanded, handing him a paper with Irene Oliver's full name, background, family members, especially about her daughter. Any specific reason for this investigation? The lawyer asked, always cautious. Deborah adjusted the diamond bracelet on her wrist. Protection of interests, Paul. This woman could compromise everything I've worked for so far. That night, as the rain lashed London, Sophia found something unexpected under her door. A small package containing a finished rag doll, with a face vaguely resembling hers, scars and all. Along with it was a note in Irene's handwriting. Some scars make us stronger. Some truths, too. The girl hugged the doll to her chest, feeling that she was getting closer to discovering the truth that the fire had failed to consume. In Irene's room, the employee stared at an old photograph. Two smiling women in a laboratory, wearing white lab coats. One was Clarice Albright. The other, a young woman with curly hair who shared Irene's eyes. On the back, a date and a handwritten phrase, "To Julia and Irene, because the truth always comes to light. With love, Clarice." Richard's absence made Albright Manor even colder. With him away, Deborah took command with an authority bordering on tyranny. The rules for Sophia became stricter. Specific meal times, limited time with Irene, and a prohibition from entering certain rooms in the house, especially the East Wing, where her mother's old laboratory was located. "It's for your own good, dear," Deborah justified, adjusting her emerald earrings as she spoke to Sophia during breakfast. "Your father and I are concerned about your isolation. We've already scheduled a visit to St. Clair's College in Ascot. It's a wonderful place with specialized therapists and children who have gone through similar situations." Sophia kept her eyes fixed on her chocolate cup, her silent refuge. "Did Dad agree to this?" she finally asked, her voice almost a whisper. "Of course, my dear, it was his idea, actually," Deborah lied with a rehearsed smile. "He feels he needs to dedicate himself entirely to the foundation now, with the new advancements in your mother's treatment." The mention of new treatments captured Sophia's attention. "What advancements? He didn't tell me anything." Deborah hesitated, realizing she had said more than she intended. "They're just preliminary tests, nothing guaranteed. Richard didn't want to create expectations." She consulted her wristwatch. "Now I have to go. Meeting with the foundation's investors. Carmen will keep an eye on you." As soon as Deborah left, Sophia quickly went up to her room. From the window, she watched her stepmother's luxury car disappear through the manor gates. It was the moment she had been waiting for. In the service corridor, she found Irene carrying clean towels. "I need your help," Sophia said without preamble. "I want to go into my mother's old laboratory." Irene froze, her face suddenly pale. "Sophia, that area has been off-limits for years. Your father expressly forbidden it." "Please," the girl pleaded. "I'm having more memories. I dreamed of Mum screaming about something not being safe. And there was a notebook. A red notebook she always carried. I need to find it." Irene placed the towels on a nearby table and knelt to be at the girl's height. "Sophia, some truths come at the right time. Forcing memories or seeking answers before their time can be dangerous. You know something, don't you?" Sophia stared intensely at the employee. "It has something to do with your daughter, Julia. I heard you crying, asking her for forgiveness." The pain in Irene's eyes was so deep that Sophia almost regretted the confrontation. The woman took a deep breath before replying, "There are things I cannot explain now, but I promise everything will make sense soon. Trust me." "How can I trust you if everyone lies?" Sophia retorted, with a maturity that didn't match her 10 years. "Dad avoids talking about the fire. Deborah wants to send me away, and now you're also hiding things from me." Irene hesitated, the conflict evident on her face. Finally, she made a decision. "Tonight, when everyone is asleep, we'll meet here." She gently squeezed the girl's shoulder. "But promise me that no matter what we find, you will follow my instructions." Sophia nodded, feeling for the first time that she was close to discovering the truth about the fire that had changed her life. Meanwhile, at the Clarice Albright Foundation office, Deborah was meeting with Dr. Frederick Miller and Paul Matthews, her lawyer. "The experimental treatment results are promising," the doctor explained, analyzing charts on his tablet. "Mrs. Albright's brain response to stimuli has significantly increased in recent weeks." "Does that mean she can wake up?" Deborah asked, barely concealing the concern in her voice. "We cannot predict with certainty, but there is a real possibility of improvement in her condition," the doctor replied. "The method she herself developed before the accident is proving revolutionary." Paul Matthews interjected, adjusting his thick-rimmed glasses. This doesn't change our plans, Deborah. The company's controlling interest remains with Richard, and under the marriage contract you will have significant participation once they formalize the union. Deborah stood up, walking to the window that offered a view of the London skyline. It's not that simple. If Clarice regains consciousness, everything changes. The treatment patent, Sophia's custody, the Foundation's control. Do you think she would remember? Paul asked, exchanging meaningful glances with the doctor. The fire, I mean. We don't know, Frederick replied, visibly uncomfortable with the turn of the conversation. Brain injuries often affect memory, but as a doctor, I must say that my only concern is the patient's well-being. Deborah smiled coldly. Of course, Doctor. It's all of our priority. Back at the manor, the sun began to set when Sophia noticed unusual activity. From her favorite hiding spot on the service staircase, she observed Carmen receiving two elegant women carrying makeup cases and clothes. Mrs. Mitchell asked that everything be ready before 8, the housekeeper instructed. She wants to throw a surprise engagement party. Sophia felt a tightness in her chest. Engagement? Her father was in Edinburgh. How could there be an engagement party? Unless... Her suspicions were confirmed hours later when she saw Deborah receiving the first guests in the main hall. The manor, usually silent, filled with laughter and music. Sophia remained invisible at the top of the stairs, observing the transformation of that space that had once been her family's happy home. The phone rang, and Carmen answered quickly. Albright Manor. A pause. Yes, sir, the party has already started. Mrs. Mitchell said you authorized it, even from afar. Another pause. I understand. I'll let her know. Sophia realized from the housekeeper's expression that her father had been caught by surprise by the party. Another one of Deborah's lies. When the night reached its peak, with dozens of guests filling the hall, Sophia took advantage of the distraction to meet Irene in the agreed-upon corridor. We have little time, the employee whispered, dressed in dark clothes instead of her usual uniform. With the party, security is focused on the guests. The two silently followed the less-used corridors of the manor until they reached the sealed door of the east wing. Yellow tape with the words restricted area still crossed the entrance, though it was faded with time. How will we get in? Sophia asked, looking at the seemingly impenetrable lock. Irene took a bunch of old keys from her pocket. Your mother entrusted these to Julia, she explained, selecting a specific key. And Julia to me. The door opened with a creak, revealing a dark, dusty corridor. The smell of smoke still lingered in the air, even after 3 years. Sophia felt a shiver run down her spine, fragments of memory pricking at the edges of her consciousness. Irene lit a small flashlight, illuminating the way. The walls still showed fire marks, and parts of the ceiling had collapsed in some places. The main laboratory is at the end of the corridor, Irene explained, her voice almost reverent. That's where your mother and Julia worked. Julia worked with my mother. Sophia stopped, surprised by the revelation. Yes, Julia was Dr. Clarice's research assistant, Irene confirmed, with evident pride in her voice. My daughter graduated in pharmacy, specializing in Amazonian plant-based medicines. Your mother hired her as soon as she saw her final project. That information changed everything. The bond between Irene and her family was much deeper than she had imagined. The main laboratory, when they finally reached it, was a mix of destruction and preservation. Half of the space had been consumed by fire, with melted equipment and charred shelves. The other half, however, remained almost intact, like a time capsule frozen at the moment of the tragedy. What exactly are we looking for? Sophia asked, feeling overwhelmed by the emotions and fragmented memories the environment evoked. The red notebook you mentioned, Irene replied, heading to a partially burned bookshelf. If it's still here, it will be where your mother used to keep her most important documents. As Irene searched, Sophia walked through the laboratory, delicately touching the objects. Empty test tubes, dust-covered microscopes, framed photographs on the wall. One of them caught her attention, her mother smiling next to a young woman who looked very much like Irene, both holding a certificate. Is that Julia? She asked, pointing to the photograph. Irene approached, emotional. Yes, that was the day they received approval for the final testing phase of the medicine they were developing. A historic moment. Sophia studied the image, noticing something curious in the background. Deborah, younger, observing the two researchers with an expression that did not seem celebratory. Did Deborah work here too? She was a representative of the pharmaceutical company that funded the research, Irene explained, her tone subtly changing. But her relationship with the project became complicated. Before she could elaborate, the sound of breaking glass alerted them. Someone else was in the laboratory. "We have to go," Irene whispered, pulling Sophia behind a workbench. "But the notebook," the girl protested. "Later. Now we need to get out of here without being seen." Crouching, they moved silently towards a side door. Sophia, however, couldn't resist the temptation to peek at who had entered. In the dim light, she recognized Dr. Frederick Miller, her mother's neurologist, rummaging through the rubble with urgency. Accompanying him was Paul Matthews, the lawyer who frequently visited Deborah. "Are you sure she mentioned this place?" the doctor asked, clearly nervous. "Absolutely. Deborah said Clarice kept a detailed record of all the formulas here. If she wakes up and remembers everything, we need to have this material in hand." Sophia felt Irene pull her firmly away. They managed to escape through an emergency exit, arriving at a small internal garden now overgrown with weeds. "What were they looking for?" Sophia asked, breathless. "And why would Deborah be worried about my mother waking up?" Irene held the girl's hands firmly. "Sophia, there's something I need to show you, but not here, not now. Go back to your room and pretend you never left. Tomorrow, in the back garden near the oak tree. Meet me there after lunch." "But trust me," Irene insisted. "It's about the red notebook. I found it, but it's not safe to talk about it now." Sophia nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. The two separated, with the girl silently returning to her room while the sounds of the party still echoed from downstairs. Lying in her bed, Sophia couldn't sleep. The night's discoveries spun in her mind. Julia, Irene's daughter, had worked with her mother. Deborah had some connection to the research project. There were people desperately searching for something in the burned laboratory. And even more disturbing, why would anyone be worried about the possibility of her mother regaining consciousness? In her room in the staff annex, Irene stared intently at the object she had rescued from the laboratory. It wasn't the red notebook, but a small USB drive hidden inside an intact fire extinguisher. On the sides, the initials CA discreetly engraved. "I got it, Julia," she whispered to the photograph of her smiling daughter she kept by her bed. "I found what your godmother Clarice hid. Now we just need the password." In the master suite, Deborah was receiving the last guests when her phone vibrated. Dr. Frederick's message was direct. "We found nothing. The laboratory is completely destroyed." She quickly typed, "Keep looking. There must be something. And increase her sedation. We cannot risk it." Deborah looked at her reflection in the mirror, adjusting her perfect smile before returning to the party. Her future as Mrs. Albright was too close to allow ghosts of the past to threaten it. Meanwhile, kilometers away, at the private clinic where Clarice Albright was hospitalized, the heart monitors registered a sudden acceleration. For a brief moment, almost imperceptible to the sleepy nurse on duty, the comatose patient's fingers moved slightly, as if trying to write a long silenced secret. The morning after the party brought a fine rain that blurred the manor windows. Sophia woke with the feeling that she floated between two worlds, that of the injured girl everyone saw, and that of the investigator who was beginning to unravel secrets buried in the ashes of the past. During breakfast, Deborah looked tired, but maintained her calculated smile. "The party was an absolute success, dear. Everyone asked about you," she lied, stirring her coffee absent-mindedly. "Your father called. He arrives tonight. It seems business in Edinburgh finished earlier than expected." Sophia slowly chewed her bread, observing her stepmother with new eyes. "That's good," she simply replied. "Can I visit him at the foundation tomorrow?" The seemingly innocent question made Deborah look up, suddenly alert. "Why this sudden interest?" "He promised we'd visit Mom when he got back," Sophia shrugged. "And I got curious about these new treatments you mentioned." A tense silence formed between the two. Deborah seemed to be calculating her response. "We'll see what your father decides, dear. He's so busy." She consulted her watch and abruptly stood up. "I need to take care of some matters. Carmen will keep an eye on you." As soon as Deborah left, Sophia walked to the window, watching her stepmother's car leave the property. She checked the clock. There were still hours until her meeting with Irene in the garden. She decided to use this time to explore her father's room, something she rarely did. The impeccably organized room maintained an impersonal air that reflected Richard's emotional void. On the bedside table, however, something caught Sophia's attention. A photograph of her with her mother, taken shortly before the fire. Beside it, a small golden fish keychain, a gift she herself had given her father years ago and which she believed had been forgotten. The desk drawer was ajar. Inside, Sophia found an envelope with the letterhead of the hospital where her mother was admitted. She cautiously opened it, revealing a medical report dated the previous week. Her eyes quickly scanned the document, stopping at phrases like significant improvement in neurological responses and possible recovery of consciousness in the coming months. Her heart raced. Why had no one told her about this? Why was Deborah insisting on sending her away just when there was real hope for her mother? Carefully putting the document away, Sophia noticed something else. A small card with Dr. Frederick Miller's phone number, the same doctor she had seen in the destroyed laboratory the night before. She memorized the number, feeling she might need it soon. At noon, when the weak sun finally managed to break through the clouds, Sophia headed to the back garden. The old oak tree, planted by Sophia's grandfather decades earlier, offered generous shade and a perfect hiding spot. Irene was already waiting for her, sitting on a stone bench, her hands nervously clasped in her lap. "You came," the employee said, a mix of relief and concern in her voice. "I found something in my father's room." Sophia went straight to the point, sitting beside Irene. "A medical report. Mom is getting better. She might wake up soon. But Deborah is hiding this from me." Irene didn't seem surprised. "I suspected as much when I heard Dr. Frederick on the phone last week. He was in the administrative corridor, thought he was alone." She took a deep breath. "Sophia, what I'm about to show you could change everything, but you need to promise me you'll be cautious. There are powerful people involved." From the cloth bag she carried, Irene took out a small USB device. "I didn't find the red notebook in the laboratory yesterday, but this was hidden inside an intact fire extinguisher. It has your mother's initials." Sophia looked at the object with fascination and fear. "What's inside?" "I don't know. It's password protected, but I believe it contains everything your mother discovered before the fire." Irene hesitated, as if weighing her next words. "Sophia, I need to tell you something about that night, something that might help you understand what happened to your mother, and to my Julia." The girl felt a chill run down her spine. "You were there, weren't you?" "You saved me." Irene nodded, tears forming in her eyes. "I worked as a cleaning assistant in the laboratory. That night I stayed late waiting for Julia to finish an experiment with your mother. They were agitated, discussing something they had discovered." She swallowed hard. "Then Deborah appeared. She and your mother had a heated argument. Clarice screamed that it wasn't safe and that they needed to redo the tests." Sophia felt a pang of recognition. Those phrases had haunted her nightmares for years. "I went out to get coffee for them, and when I came back..." Irene's voice faltered. "The fire had already started in the electrical wing. I heard screams. I ran inside and found you, unconscious on the floor. Your mother was trying to reach something in the security cabinet, screaming about evidence and documents." "And Julia?" Sophia could barely breathe. Irene's face contorted in pain. "She tried to help Clarice save the documents. The last time I saw her, she was running to the main safe while I carried you out." A tear streamed down her face. When the firefighters arrived, the ceiling structure had collapsed. Julia was taken to the hospital in serious condition. Irene didn't need to finish the sentence. Sophia understood the young assistant's fate. "That's why you came back," Sophia concluded, squeezing the woman's hand. "To find the truth. To honor Julia's and your mother's sacrifice," Irene corrected, "and to protect you. I promised Julia, as she said goodbye, that I would take care of you as if you were my own daughter." A silence heavy with emotion enveloped the two. Sophia processed the revelations, trying to fit them into the fragmented pieces of her own memories. "But why did my father never mention you? Why did no one talk about Julia? Your father was in Westminster that night at a government meeting about patents. When he arrived, I had already been taken by the paramedics. In the following weeks, while you and your mother were hospitalized, I received a visit from Paul Matthews, Deborah's lawyer. He offered me a significant amount to forget what I had seen and heard. When I refused, The threats began. Sophia felt a growing anger. And Deborah? How did she manage to stay with my father after all that? She was by his side during the most difficult moments, presenting herself as support and comfort. With Clarice in a coma and you traumatized, Richard clung to the only person who seemed to offer stability. Irene sighed. Besides, the foundation depends on the pharmaceutical company she represents, a convenient relationship for both. The conversation was interrupted by the sound of approaching footsteps. Quickly, Irene hid the USB drive, and Sophia pretended to be collecting leaves for a school project. It was Carmen, the housekeeper, with a suspicious expression. "Sophia, your online class starts in 10 minutes, she announced, casting a disapproving glance at Irene. "And you, there are clothes to iron. Mrs. Mitchell was specific about your priorities today." As they parted, Irene discreetly whispered, "Tonight, after everyone is asleep, in my room. We'll try to figure out the password." The rest of the day dragged on with agonizing slowness for Sophia. During her online classes, she could barely concentrate, her mind buzzing with Irene's revelations. Around 7 in the evening, she heard the sound of her father's car arriving. For the first time in a long time, she felt the impulse to run to greet him. Richard looked exhausted but smiled genuinely upon seeing his daughter coming down the stairs. "You're different," he observed, hugging her shyly. "There's a new light in your eyes." "I missed you," Sophia replied, surprising herself with her sincerity. Deborah appeared shortly after, kissing her fiancé and casting a calculated look at Sophia. "Darling, we need to talk about the visit to St. Clair's College. I scheduled it for Monday." Richard frowned. "What visit? We didn't agree on any of that." "We talked about it before your trip, remember?" Deborah insisted, her soft tone contrasting with the tension in her eyes. "For Sophia to meet new children, to have a more structured environment." Sophia intervened with a courage she didn't know she possessed. "Dad, I found Mom's medical report in your room. She's getting better, isn't she? She might wake up soon." A tense silence fell over the trio. Richard looked from Sophia to Deborah, confusion and suspicion in his gaze. "How did you—" he began, before sighing deeply. "Yes, there are positive indications, but I didn't want to create expectations until we were certain." "Then why does Deborah want to send me away right now?" Sophia questioned, her voice trembling with emotion. Richard's expression turned to shock. "Is that right, Deborah? Was it your idea?" The woman nervously adjusted her hair, trying to maintain her composure. "Richard, let's talk about this in private. Sophia is confused, obviously." "I'm not confused," the girl retorted, tears in her eyes. "You want to keep me away from my mother. Maybe because you have something to hide about the fire." The mention of the fire made Richard turn pale. "Sophia, what are you talking about?" "The fire was a terrible accident, caused by a short circuit in the electrical system." "That's what they made us believe," Sophia replied, remembering Irene's words. "But there were people in the laboratory that night, people who were arguing about something not being safe." Richard turned to Deborah, who maintained an impassive expression, though her paleness betrayed her. "Where is all this coming from, Sophia?" he asked, genuinely confused. Before she could answer, Carmen appeared at the top of the stairs. "Sir, Mrs. Mitchell has an urgent call from the Foundation. Dr. Frederick Miller asks to speak with her immediately." Deborah quickly recomposed herself. "It must be about the new investments. Excuse me." As soon as she walked away, Richard sat on the sofa, inviting Sophia to do the same. "Daughter, I know these years have been difficult. I myself can barely process everything that happened, but creating conspiracy theories doesn't help. The fire was thoroughly investigated." "By whom, Dad? By Deborah's lawyers?" Sophia didn't recognize her own audacity. "Did you know Irene's daughter worked with Mom? That she was in the laboratory that night?" Richard's expression changed completely. "Irene, the new employee?" He seemed genuinely surprised. "What does she have to do with this?" "She was there, Dad. She's the one who saved me from the fire, and her daughter Julia was Mom's assistant." Richard stood up abruptly, running his hands through his face. "That's impossible. The firefighters' report indicated you were rescued by them, and I don't recall any assistant named Julia." "Because someone altered the story," Sophia insisted. "Just like they're hiding Mum's improvement, trying to send me away." The conversation was interrupted by Deborah's return, who wore a radiant smile, though her eyes remained cold. "Great news," she announced. "The Foundation has just received approval for the new testing phase. We need to celebrate." Richard, still visibly disturbed by the conversation with Sophia, tried to smile. "That's excellent. We'll talk about the details tomorrow. I'm exhausted from the trip." "Of course, darling," Deborah agreed, casting a warning glance at Sophia. "Tomorrow will be a new day, with new perspectives." That night, Sophia waited patiently for the house to fall asleep. Around midnight, she silently slipped down the corridor to the staff annex. Irene's room was at the end of the corridor, identified by a small, makeshift sign. She knocked softly, 3 times, as they had agreed. There was no response. Intrigued, Sophia ventured to open the door. The room was empty, the bed perfectly made, as if no one had been there for hours. On the pillow, she found a hastily written note. "Sophia, I had to leave urgently. Don't trust anyone. The password is where the fire started. So obvious no one noticed. Find me at the place where the waters heal." Sophia's heart raced. Irene had left, perhaps forced, perhaps as a precaution. In a quick inspection, she noticed that Julia's photograph had also disappeared, but the USB drive was there, hidden inside a small teddy bear on the dresser. She heard footsteps in the corridor and quickly hid the USB drive in her pajama pocket. The door opened, revealing Carmen with a severe expression. "What are you doing here, girl?" the housekeeper asked, crossing her arms. Sophia quickly improvised. "I had a nightmare. I wanted to talk to Irene. She always calms me down." "Irene no longer works here," Carmen replied, her tone making it clear she didn't believe the story. "Mrs. Mitchell fired her this afternoon, caught her rummaging through documents in the office." Sophia's blood ran cold. The accusation was obviously fabricated. "That's not true. Irene would never do that. It's not my place to judge, only to inform, and to inform you that you should return to your room immediately before Mrs. Mitchell discovers this nocturnal escapade." Reluctantly, Sophia allowed herself to be escorted back to her room. As soon as the door closed, she took the USB drive from her pocket, staring at it as if it were the key to a dangerous treasure. "The password is where the fire started. So obvious no one noticed." Irene's message echoed in her mind. Where exactly had the fire started? According to her father, in the electrical system. But according to the fragmented memories that now returned, it had been near the main laboratory. What could be so obvious that no one noticed? Sophia lay down, hiding the USB drive inside her favorite rag doll, the one Irene had made for her. Tomorrow, she thought, she would need to find a computer and discover what her mother had so carefully hidden. Meanwhile, kilometers away, at the private clinic where Clarice Albright remained hospitalized, a nurse noticed with astonishment that the comatose patient had written something on the palm of her hand. A name scrawled with the tip of a pen. Sophia. As if, even in the darkness of her coma, the scientist struggled to reach her daughter and reveal the truth that the ashes had failed to bury. Irene's absence weighed on Sophia like a dark cloud. During breakfast, the table seemed larger and colder, with Richard absorbed in his tablet, reviewing Foundation reports and Deborah talking incessantly about the official engagement party she was planning for the following month. "I've been thinking about an Amazonian theme in honor of the Foundation's work," she said, as Sophia distractedly played with her cereal. "Something elegant, but meaningful." Richard merely nodded, his eyes betraying concern. Since his conversation with Sophia the night before, something seemed to have deeply disturbed him. "Sophia," he finally interrupted Deborah's monologue, "after breakfast, I'd like to visit your mother. Would you like to come with me?" The question caught both Sophia and Deborah by surprise. "But Richard, you have that meeting with the investors at 10, Deborah protested, barely concealing the alarm in her voice. "I can reschedule," he replied with unusual firmness. "Some matters are more important than business." Sophia's eyes lit up. It was the perfect opportunity not only to see her mother, but also to try to understand the enigma left by Irene. "The place where the waters heal. Could it be the hospital?" "I'd love to, Dad," she replied with genuine enthusiasm. Deborah shifted in her chair, visibly uncomfortable. "In that case, I'd like to accompany you. After all, we'll soon officially be a family." The private clinic where Clarice was hospitalized was located in a quiet London borough, surrounded by meticulously maintained gardens. The modern glass and concrete building housed some of the country's most complex medical cases, with an entire wing dedicated to patients in a vegetative state, the so-called water pavilion, due to the aquatic therapy used in neurological recovery. As they walked down the aseptic corridor towards Clarice's room, Sophia carefully observed every detail, looking for clues. The place where the waters heal. Could it truly be where she was supposed to meet Irene? Dr. Frederick Miller received them at the door of the room, his professional expression barely concealing his surprise at seeing the three of them together. "Mr. Albright, what a coincidence. We were just analyzing the new results of Dr. Clarice's tests." Richard shook the doctor's hand firmly. "And how is she, doctor? No beating around the bush, please." Frederick hesitated, looking briefly at Deborah before replying, "We have observed increasing brain activity in recent weeks. It is not yet possible to make definitive statements, but there are promising signs that she may be emerging from her current state." Sophia felt her heart race. The report she had found didn't lie. Her mother was really getting better. "Can we see her?" she asked anxiously. "Of course," the doctor replied, opening the room door. "I just ask that you keep conversations positive. Recent studies show that patients in this condition can perceive more than we imagine." The room was spacious and bright, with a window offering a view of the clinic's gardens. Clarice Albright rested in a special bed, surrounded by sophisticated equipment that monitored every aspect of her vital functions. Despite 3 years in a coma, her face maintained a serenity that impressed Sophia. Her dark hair, now with a few silver strands, was carefully combed on the pillow. Richard approached first, taking his wife's hand in his. "Hi, Cla," he said, using the affectionate nickname Sophia hadn't heard in years. "I brought someone special to see you." Sophia stepped forward, feeling a mix of emotions so intense she could barely breathe. She had visited her mother many times over the years, but this time was different. Now there was hope. "Hi, Mum," she whispered, gently touching Clarice's arm. "I'm here." Deborah remained distant near the door, exchanging meaningful glances with Dr. Frederick. "I'll get some coffee," she announced, clearly uncomfortable. "Doctor, would you mind accompanying me? I have some questions about the treatment." When the two left, Sophia took advantage of the moment alone with her father. "Dad, I need to ask you something important," she began, her voice low but determined. "Did you know anyone named Julia Oliver? She worked with Mom in the laboratory." Richard frowned thoughtfully. "Julia," he repeated slowly. "There were so many assistants and interns in your mother's laboratory. The name seems familiar, but she was Irene's daughter, the employee who was fired yesterday." A flash of recognition passed through Richard's eyes. "Wait, Irene, short curly hair, Cornish accent." When Sophia nodded, he seemed genuinely confused. "But that's impossible. The Irene I knew had worked as a cleaner in the laboratory for years. If she's in our house now, why didn't she say anything?" "Perhaps because someone threatened her," Sophia suggested. "Someone who didn't want the truth about the fire to come to light." Richard seemed increasingly disturbed. "What truth, Sophia? It was a terrible accident. The electrical system failed, causing the fire. The investigators were clear about that. Dad, remember when you told me you weren't home that night? That you were in Westminster?" Sophia approached, lowering her voice even further. "Who was in the laboratory with Mom then?" Before Richard could answer, a slight movement captured both their attention. Clarice's fingers had moved almost imperceptibly on the sheet. "Did you see that?" Sophia whispered, emotional. Richard, pale, nodded. He pressed the nurse's call button. "We need to call Dr. Frederick," he said, his voice trembling. "This has never happened before." While they waited, Sophia noticed something on the bedside table, a sketchbook and some pencils, probably left by occupational therapists who were trying to stimulate Clarice. Approaching, she saw that something was scribbled on the first page, irregular lines that together formed what looked like a number. "Dad, look at this," she called, pointing to the notebook. Richard examined the drawing with perplexity. "It looks like someone was trying to write something," he commented, uncertain. "Maybe one of the nurses." "Or Mom," Sophia completed, her heart pounding. "Dr. Frederick said she's responding to stimuli, didn't he?" Before they could explore this possibility further, Deborah returned, followed by the doctor. Both looked tense. "Did something happen?" Frederick asked, quickly approaching the bed. "Her hand moved," Richard explained. "It was slight, but definite." The doctor examined the monitors, checked Clarice's vital signs and performed some response to stimuli tests. "There is definitely an increase in brain activity," he confirmed. "But we cannot create premature expectations. The path to recovery, if there is one, will be long and gradual." Deborah placed her hand on Richard's shoulder in a gesture that seemed comforting, but Sophia noticed the excessive pressure of her fingers. "Darling, I think it's best we go. You have that important meeting, remember? And Sophia seems tired." "I want to stay a little longer," the girl protested. "Please, Dad." Richard seemed divided, his gaze alternating between his daughter and his fiancée. "Perhaps it really is better if we come back later," he finally agreed. "Dr. Frederick will inform us if there are any changes, won't you, Doctor?" The doctor nodded, avoiding Sophia's intense gaze. "Certainly, Mr. Albright. Any alteration, I will be the first to communicate." Reluctant, Sophia said goodbye to her mother, whispering in her ear, "I'll find out the truth, Mum. I promise." As they left the room, Sophia asked to use the restroom, momentarily separating herself from the adults. Instead of going to the toilet, however, she quickly headed to the aquatic therapy area, the true place where the waters heal. The spacious hall with therapeutic pools was almost empty at that time of morning. Sophia examined every corner, looking for Irene or any sign left by her. When she was about to give up, a cleaning staff member approached. "You must be Sophia," the woman, an elderly lady with gray hair, said. "Irene said you would come." The girl's heart leaped. "You saw her? Where is she?" The woman looked around, making sure they were alone. "She was here last night. She left this for you." She handed her a small envelope. "She said it was urgent." Sophia quickly put the envelope in her pocket. "Did she mention where she was going?" "She just said she'd be in a safe place, and that you would understand the message when the time was right." Sophia thanked the woman and hurried back to the lobby, where her father and Deborah were probably already waiting for her. The envelope burned in her pocket, a secret she would need to hide until the right moment. On the way back to the manor, the silence in the car was almost palpable. Richard seemed lost in thought, his hands gripping the steering wheel with unnecessary force. Deborah maintained an artificial conversation about plans for the house's decoration, clearly trying to dissipate the tension. Sophia observed the urban landscape through the window, her mind working frantically to connect the pieces of the puzzle, the USB drive hidden in her room, the enigma about the password, her mother's hand movement, Irene's still unread note. Everything indicated a greater truth that was about to emerge from the ashes of the past. Back at the manor, Richard announced that he needed to go to the foundation to resolve urgent matters. "I'll be back for dinner," he promised, kissing the top of Sophia's head. "Perhaps we can talk more about everything." As soon as she was alone, Sophia ran to her room and locked the door. With trembling hands, she opened the envelope left by Irene. Inside, there was an old key and a hastily written note. "Sophia, it's not safe to stay at the manor. They found out who I am. The truth about the fire is on the USB drive. The password is Amazonia 2021, the name of your mother's project, and the year everything happened. The safe in Clarice's headboard holds the original red notebook. This key opens it. When you can, come to your grandparents' old summer house in Bath. I have evidence that can awaken your father to reality. Be careful with Deborah and the doctor. Don't trust anyone. Irene." Sophia's heart raced. She needed a computer to access the USB drive, but how could she do that without being discovered? The house devices were certainly monitored by Deborah. The solution came unexpectedly when Carmen knocked on her door. "Sophia, your online piano lesson starts in 15 minutes. The laptop is set up in the music room." The piano lesson she had completely forgotten. It was her chance to use a computer without raising suspicions. At the appointed time, Sophia headed to the music room, the USB drive hidden in her sleeve. While waiting for the connection with the teacher, she discreetly inserted the USB device into the side of the laptop. A protected folder appeared on the screen, requesting a password. With hesitant fingers, Sophia typed Amazonia 2021. The folder opened, revealing dozens of files, scientific reports, chemical formulas, emails, and, most importantly, a digital diary dated from the 3 months prior to the fire. Sophia clicked on the latter, her eyes quickly scanning the entries. January 12, 2021. We finally managed to isolate the active compound from the Amazonian plant. The results are promising, but we need more tests before moving on to clinical trials. Deborah pressures for immediate results, but Julia and I agree it would be irresponsible. January 28, 2021. Something strange is happening. Some preliminary test data was altered in the official records. I confronted Deborah, who suggested a typographical error. I will keep separate backups of everything from now on. February 15, 2021. We discovered severe side effects at higher doses of the compound. I recommended halting progress to human trials until we resolve this. Deborah was furious, mentioned deadlines with investors and threatened to cut funding. Richard is in Westminster negotiating patents. When he returns, we need to have a serious talk. The last entry was from February 17, 2021, the day of the fire. Julia found evidence of deliberate tampering with the results sent to the MHRA. The risks of the medication were minimized and the benefits exaggerated. I confronted Deborah this morning. She initially denied it, then admitted it, justifying that some sacrifices are necessary for progress. I threatened to report everything to the authorities. Tonight, Julia and I will gather all documentation to deliver to the Department of Health and Social Care tomorrow. The safe in the laboratory is no longer safe. I transferred everything to the personal safe in my room. Richard will know what to do when he returns from Westminster. I hope he understands that this is bigger than us, bigger than the company. It's about lives at risk. Sophia felt a tear stream down her face. Her mother's words, written hours before the tragedy, revealed a courage and integrity that only reinforced the admiration she had always felt for her. The piano teacher's voice through the headphones startled her. "Sophia, are you listening? Shall we begin?" Quickly, she closed the files and removed the USB drive, hiding it again. "Yes, Professor. Sorry for the delay." During the lesson, her fingers moved mechanically across the virtual keys of the digital piano, but her mind was kilometers away, processing everything she had discovered. Her mother had found serious problems with the medicine they were developing. Deborah, representing the pharmaceutical company, had falsified results. And on the night of the fire, Clarice and Julia were about to report everything. The fire was not accidental. It was a desperate attempt to destroy evidence and silence whistleblowers. As soon as the lesson ended, Sophia ran back to her room, the weight of the newly discovered truth almost unbearable. She needed to find a way to get to Bath, where Irene was waiting for her. And she needed to visit her mother again to find the safe and the original red notebook. But before she could elaborate a plan, she heard raised voices coming from downstairs. Her father had returned earlier than expected and seemed to be heatedly arguing with someone. Sophia silently approached the stairs, hiding to listen. "How could you do that?" Richard's voice trembled with rage. "Falsify clinical test results. People could have died." "You don't understand." Deborah's voice was cold and controlled. "That medicine represented billions in market potential. Some side effects would be adjusted in the next phase." "Side effects? We're talking about acute liver failure, and you knew about it from the beginning." Sophia covered her mouth to stifle a gasp. Her father had discovered the truth. "Who told you this?" Deborah demanded to know. "It was that cleaner, wasn't it? Irene Oliver. Or should I say the mother of the assistant who couldn't keep her mouth shut?" "It was Dr. Frederick," Richard replied. "Apparently he can no longer live with the guilt. He confessed everything this afternoon. How you pressured him to alter Clarice's medical reports to keep her sedated. How you helped cover up the true cause of the fire." "Frederick was always weak," Deborah sneered. "What do you intend to do now, Richard? Report me. Destroy everything we've built. The foundation depends on my company. Without our funding, Clarice's treatment ends. Is that a threat?" "It's reality. You have a lot to lose, Richard. Think of Sophia, your reputation." The girl didn't need to hear more. She retreated silently, her heart pounding. She needed to act quickly. Her father was finally seeing the truth, but Deborah still had enough power to manipulate him. In her room, Sophia grabbed a small backpack and put the essentials inside: the USB drive, the safe key, a few changes of clothes, and the rag doll made by Irene. She opened the window and looked down. The old oak tree offered branches that could serve as a natural ladder to the garden. As she prepared for the most important escape of her life, Sophia thought of her mother, struggling to emerge from her coma, and of Irene risking everything to honor her daughter's memory and protect her. Two brave women whose strength now ran in her own veins. With a determination she had never felt before, Sophia whispered to herself, "It's time to finish what they started." The descent down the old oak tree was harder than Sophia had imagined. Her small fingers gripped the uneven branches as she tried to ignore the height that separated her from the ground. The scars on her face burned with the effort, as if awakening along with her courage. When she finally touched the damp lawn of the garden, night had already taken over the city. The mansion lights cast long shadows over the grounds, creating a labyrinth of darkness that Sophia needed to navigate to reach the gates. The sound of her father and Deborah's argument still echoed in her ears, fueling her determination. Following the sidewall, Sophia reached a small service door usually used by the gardeners. To her surprise, the door was unlocked, as if someone had foreseen her escape, perhaps a last gesture from Irene before leaving. The deserted street provided the anonymity she needed. Sophia pulled up the hood of her sweatshirt to partially cover her scarred face and walked quickly towards the main avenue, where she could find a taxi. The money she had saved from birthday and Christmas gifts over the years would finally be useful. "St. Luke's Clinic, please," she told the driver, who finally stopped for her, inventing a story about visiting her sick grandmother to justify her solitary journey. During the journey, Sophia mentally calculated her next steps. She needed to retrieve the red notebook from the safe in her mother's room and then find a way to get to Bath, where Irene was waiting for her with the final evidence. The clinic seemed different at night, quieter, more mysterious. Sophia took advantage of the shift change of the nurses to slip down the corridor unnoticed, remembering the way to her mother's room as if she had a map etched in her memory. The door was ajar and only a soft light illuminated the room. Sophia entered silently, her heart racing as she saw her mother asleep, connected to the equipment that monitored her vital signs. She approached the bed and gently held Clarice's hand. "Hi, Mom," she whispered. "I came for what you hid. I'm going to finish what you and Julia started." Sophia examined the room, looking for something that could be a safe. The headboard mentioned by Irene was a structure built into the wall with small drawers and compartments for medicines and personal items. After a few minutes of silent searching, she found a panel that looked slightly different from the others. When she pressed it lightly, it moved, revealing a small door with a lock. The key left by Irene fit perfectly. With a soft click, the safe opened, revealing its contents: the famous red notebook with a worn cover, some photographs, and a small USB drive different from the one she already had. "I found it," Sophia murmured, feeling the weight of the discovery. As she was about to close the safe, she noticed a subtle movement. Her mother's fingers had contracted slightly on the sheet. Then, to her absolute astonishment, Clarice's eyes opened, just a slit, but enough for their eyes to meet for the first time in 3 years. "Mom?" Sophia could barely breathe, quickly approaching. "Are you awake?" Clarice's lips moved slightly, without making a sound. She seemed to be trying to say something with enormous effort. Sophia leaned in, trying to understand. "Danger," Clarice whispered, her voice almost inaudible after years of disuse. Deborah." A wave of emotions overcame Sophia. Joy, fear, hope, all mixed together. Her mother was awakening, and her first word was a warning. "I know, Mom," she replied, gently squeezing her hand. "I found out everything. The adulterated medicine, the fire, the threats. I'm going to find Irene. She has the final evidence." Clarice's eyes widened slightly upon hearing the name, and she managed to give a small affirmative nod. The silent communication between mother and daughter transcended the need for complete words. "I'll call the doctor. Tell him you woke up." Sophia began to move away, but Clarice's weak hand squeezed hers, stopping her. "Don't trust," the scientist whispered, the effort evident in each syllable. "Frederick involved." Sophia nodded, understanding. Dr. Frederick might have confessed the truth to Richard, but that didn't mean he was trustworthy. He could still be under Deborah's influence. "I'll bring Dad here," she promised, putting the notebook and the USB drive in her backpack. "He needs to see you awake. He needs to hear the truth from you." A noise in the corridor alerted Sophia, voices approaching. She immediately recognized Deborah's authoritative tone. There was no time to hide. "Hide," Clarice whispered, her eyes indicating the bathroom attached to the room. Sophia barely had time to hide before the door opened completely, revealing Deborah accompanied by Dr. Frederick. "We need to increase her sedation," Deborah said, her voice sharp. "Richard is out of control, making absurd accusations. If Clarice wakes up now and confirms any part of this story—" "I've already explained the risks of altering the medication protocol," the doctor replied, visibly uncomfortable. "Besides, I confessed everything to Richard. It's over, Deborah." "Nothing is over," she retorted, furious. "You have as much to lose as I do. Or have you forgotten who signed the false reports?" From her hiding spot, Sophia watched through the crack in the bathroom door, her heart pounding so hard she feared she would be heard. Deborah approached Clarice's bed, examining her coldly. "Anyway, she's still the same, a sleeping beauty who will never again—" Deborah stopped abruptly, leaning in to examine Clarice's face. "Wait, her eye, they moved." Dr. Frederick quickly approached, checking the vital signs on the monitors. "My God," he murmured, genuinely surprised. "Brain activity is significantly increasing. She is emerging from the coma." Panic seized Deborah. "Do something. She can't wake up now." "I cannot medicate a patient against protocol just because you order it," the doctor retorted, finally finding the courage to confront the woman. "This ends here, Deborah. We've destroyed enough evidence. We've manipulated too many results. I'm fed up with being your accomplice." Deborah's expression transformed into something unrecognizable, a mask of fury and despair. "You think you can just walk away from this? That you can betray me like this?" Her voice trembled with rage. "Without me, you would be nothing. I built your career, Frederick, and almost destroyed my conscience in the process," he replied, backing away. "I'm calling Richard right now. He deserves to know his wife is waking up." Before he could reach the door, Deborah grabbed his arm with surprising strength. "You're not going anywhere." Sophia watched the scene with growing horror. The situation was escalating into something dangerous. She needed to intervene, but how? Her gaze fell on the emergency phone on the bathroom wall. An idea formed instantly. With trembling fingers, she dialed her father's cell phone number, which she knew by heart. To her relief, Richard answered on the first ring. "Sophia, where are you? We're all looking for you." "Dad," she whispered, trying not to be heard by Deborah. "I'm at the hospital. Mom is waking up. Deborah is here with Dr. Frederick, trying to stop it. Come quickly." "I'm on my way," Richard replied, the urgency evident in his voice. "Don't leave. And Sophia, stay away from Deborah." Hanging up the phone, Sophia needed to decide the next step. She couldn't stay hidden while Deborah possibly did something against her mother or the doctor. Taking a deep breath, she opened the bathroom door. "Enough, Deborah," she announced, surprising everyone with her presence. "It's over." Her stepmother turned, momentarily stunned. "Sophia, what are you doing here?" Her gaze alternated between the girl and the objects in her open backpack, recognizing the red notebook. "What is that? What did you take?" "The truth," Sophia replied, with a confidence she had never felt before. "My mother's notebook, with all the original notes about the medication, the evidence you tried to destroy in the fire." Deborah's face paled. "You don't know what you're talking about, girl. This is an adult matter, things you wouldn't understand." "I understand perfectly," Sophia retorted. "You falsified test results for a dangerous medicine. When my mother and Julia discovered it, you caused the fire to destroy the evidence. And since then you've kept my mother sedated so she could never tell the truth." Dr. Frederick seemed shocked by the girl's lucidity and knowledge. "How do you know all this?" "Irene told me part of it. The rest I found in the files my mother hid." Sophia kept a safe distance from Deborah. "My father already knows everything. He's on his way." The mention of Richard seemed to awaken something in Deborah. Her face transformed, taking on an almost maternal expression. "Sophia, dear, you're confused. This fire was traumatic for all of us. Your memory created a distorted version of the facts." She approached slowly. "Come, let's go home. Your father must be worried." "Don't come closer," Sophia warned, backing away. "My father knows the truth. Dr. Frederick told him today." Deborah cast a furious glare at the doctor. "You traitor, after everything I did for you." "I did what I should have done a long time ago," Frederick replied, positioning himself protectively between Deborah and Clarice's bed. "Come near the patient and I'll call security." The situation seemed about to explode when the room door opened abruptly, revealing Richard, breathless and with a determined expression. His eyes quickly scanned the scene. Sophia cornered in a corner, Frederick protecting Clarice and Deborah in the center, like a cornered predator. "Sophia!" Richard exclaimed, running to embrace his daughter. "Are you all right?" "I am, Dad," she replied, finally feeling safe. "But most importantly, Mom woke up. She spoke to me." Richard turned to the bed, where, to his surprise and emotion, Clarice's eyes were open, observing the scene with increasing lucidity. "Cla," he whispered, approaching cautiously, as if he feared he was dreaming. Richard." Clarice's voice was almost inaudible, but unmistakably real. The businessman fell to his knees beside the bed, taking his wife's hand in his, tears streaming freely down his face. "Forgive me," he murmured, "for not seeing the truth, for not protecting you and Sophia." Deborah watched the scene with growing despair, realizing that her empire of lies crumbled before her eyes. In a sudden movement, she grabbed Sophia's bag. "This belongs to me," she shouted, trying to retrieve the red notebook. In the ensuing confusion, Deborah managed to grab the notebook and ran for the door. Sophia, driven by a courage she didn't know she possessed, chased her stepmother down the corridor. "Stop," she shouted, as Deborah quickly descended the emergency stairs. The chase continued until they reached the hospital's rooftop, a spacious open area where helicopters occasionally landed to transport patients. The fine rain falling made the floor slippery, increasing the danger of the situation. Deborah ran to the edge of the rooftop, looking at the 10-story abyss that separated her from the ground. "Don't come closer," she warned, holding the notebook precariously over the void. "One step and all the evidence disappears." Sophia stopped, maintaining her distance. "It doesn't matter anymore, Deborah. We have digital copies of everything. Mom is awake and can testify. It's over." Deborah's expression oscillated between fury and despair. "You don't understand what's at stake, girl. That medicine represented billions. I would be recognized worldwide. Some side effects are inevitable in the development of any drug." "Side effects?" Sophia couldn't believe what she was hearing. "People could have died. You almost killed my mother and Julia." "Julia was weak, like your mother," Deborah interrupted bitterly. "Always with this absurd scientific ethics, this exaggerated concern with protocols. Science advances with risks, with daring." "Science advances with truth," Sophia retorted. "That's what my mother always advocated." Deborah backed up a few more steps, dangerously close to the edge of the rooftop. "Truth is relative, Sophia, and you're too young to understand how the world really works." At that moment, Richard and Dr. Frederick reached the rooftop, followed by 2 hospital security guards. "Deborah, step away from the edge," Richard pleaded, approaching cautiously. "We'll resolve this civilly." The woman laughed, a cold, humorless sound. "Civilly? How civil were you when you accused me today? How civil was Clarice when she threatened to destroy everything we worked for?" "What we worked to build was based on honesty and true science," Richard replied, "not on falsifications and greed." The rain intensified, making the situation increasingly dangerous. Deborah, in her desperation, took another step back, not realizing how close she was to the abyss. "Don't judge me, Richard. You enjoyed the benefits, the fame, the money my company brought to the foundation. Your hands are not as clean as you think." A sudden movement caused Deborah to momentarily lose her balance. Her foot slipped on the wet edge, and for a terrible instant, she swayed over the void, her arms flailing for support. Sophia, in an impulse that surprised everyone, including herself, ran towards Deborah, extending her hand to her. "Hold my hand!" she shouted, ignoring the danger. Deborah hesitated for a second, shock etched on her face. Then, in a last moment of humanity, she grabbed Sophia's outstretched hand. Richard and Frederick ran to help, pulling them away from the dangerous edge. When Deborah was finally safe on the ground, Sophia could see something she had never noticed before. Behind the mask of perfection and hardness, there was a broken and frightened woman whose ambitions had consumed her humanity. "Why?" Deborah asked, confused. "Why did you save me after everything I did?" Sophia looked at her own scars reflected in a puddle of water. "Because some scars teach us compassion," she simply replied, and because justice doesn't mean revenge. The security guards approached, taking control of the situation. Deborah handed the red notebook to Sophia, a silent gesture of surrender. As she was led inside, she cast a last glance at Richard and Sophia. No longer threatening, just profoundly weary. "What happens now?" Sophia asked her father, as they returned to Clarice's room. Richard sighed, his protective arm around his daughter's shoulders. "Many things will change. There will be investigations, legal proceedings, restructuring of the foundation. But most importantly," he smiled softly, "is that we will rebuild our family, one day at a time." In the room, they found Clarice more awake, managing to form short but coherent sentences. Her eyes lit up upon seeing Sophia and Richard return. "My brave one," she whispered, extending her hand to her daughter. "I knew you would find the truth." Sophia sat on the edge of the bed, showing the red notebook. "I found it, Mom. And there's more. Irene is waiting for us in Bath with the final evidence." Richard seemed confused. "Irene? The employee Deborah fired. What does she have to do with this?" Sophia and Clarice exchanged a knowing glance. "She was Julia's mother, my assistant," Clarice explained, pausing frequently to catch her breath. "She was in the laboratory on the night of the fire. She saved Sophia." The realization hit Richard like a wave. All this time, she was close to us to protect Sophia and to honor her daughter's memory, Sophia completed. "We need to find her now. She's afraid to return to the manor until she knows she's safe." 2 weeks later, Sophia's grandparents' old summer house in Bath became the setting for an emotional reunion. The property, abandoned for years after Richard's parents passed away, now gained new life with the reunited family's presence. Clarice, still recovering but surprisingly strong for someone who had spent 3 years in a coma, was seated in a wheelchair on the spacious terrace that offered a view of the valley. Sophia remained by her side, as she had constantly since her mother was discharged from the hospital. Richard nervously paced the garden, repeatedly checking his watch. "Are you sure she'll come?" he asked, for the 3rd time that afternoon. Sophia smiled patiently. "I am. I spoke to her yesterday on the phone. She said she had some things to resolve, but that she would be here today." As if conjured by her words, a taxi approached down the dirt track leading to the property. Irene stepped out, carrying a small suitcase and a bulky folder. Her face lit up upon seeing the reunited family. The reunion was filled with emotion. Irene and Clarice embraced for a long time, united by shared grief and the fight for justice. Sophia joined the hug, forming a circle that symbolized the closure of a painful cycle. "Thank you for taking care of my little one," Clarice said, holding Irene's hands. "Julia would be proud of you." Irene smiled through tears. "And of you too, Clarice. We achieved what they wanted. The truth came to light." Richard approached hesitantly, clearly emotional. "I can never thank you enough for what you've done for my family, Irene. Not only for saving Sophia from the fire, but for persisting when everyone else gave up." The woman nodded, accepting the thanks with the dignity that had always characterized her. "I brought the final documents," she said, handing the folder to Richard. "Emails, altered records, evidence that Deborah did not act alone. The entire pharmaceutical company was involved in the fraud." As the adults discussed the ongoing legal proceedings, Sophia moved away a little, walking to the edge of the terrace. From there, she could contemplate the small town in the distance, its lights beginning to twinkle in the twilight. She felt a presence beside her, Irene, with her gentle smile. "What are you thinking about, little one?" Sophia reflected for a moment. "How everything seems different now, as if I'm seeing the world through a clean window for the first time." Irene nodded, understanding. "Scars change us, Sophia. Sometimes they harden us, sometimes they open us to greater compassion. Like when I saved Deborah on the rooftop," the girl commented, recalling the crucial moment. "I didn't think, I just acted." "It was your heart showing that you are greater than the pain you suffered," Irene replied. "That is the true healing." They remained silent for a few moments, absorbing the tranquility of the evening. "What's going to happen now?" Sophia finally asked. "Many good things," Irene replied, smiling. "Your mother will continue to recover. The foundation will be restructured to truly serve its original purpose. And as for you, as for me, you can finally just be Sophia, not the scarred girl, not the businessman's daughter, not the victim of a tragedy. Just Sophia, with all your courage and kindness." The girl smiled, feeling the weight of the last 3 years finally dissipating. "And you, Irene, will you stay with us?" Irene hugged her by the shoulders. "If you want me around, there's no place I'd rather be." Richard approached, bringing Clarice in her wheelchair. "Actually, Irene, we have a proposal for you," he began. "We are reforming the foundation. It will no longer be focused solely on treatments for comatose patients, but also on ensuring ethics in pharmaceutical research. We would like you to lead the Ethical Supervision Department in honor of Julia." Irene seemed speechless, too emotional to respond immediately. "I'm not a scientist like Julia was," she finally said. "But you have the heart and integrity that the scientific world needs," Clarice replied. "Besides, no one better to ensure that what happened to us does not happen to other families." Night fell completely, enveloping the house in a blanket of stars. The 4 people remained on the terrace, discussing future plans, recalling memories, and, most importantly, celebrating the chance for a new beginning. Weeks later, the British press was captivated by the extraordinary story. Scientist wakes after 3 years in coma and exposes pharmaceutical fraud. Businessman reforms foundation and dedicates himself to ethics in science. 10-year-old girl and former cleaner heroines in uncovering the truth. The Clarice Albright Foundation transformed into the largest independent center for ethical verification of medical research in Europe. A new building was inaugurated, named the Julia Oliver Center for Scientific Ethics. Deborah Mitchell and the pharmaceutical company executives faced lawsuits for fraud, falsification of results, and criminal negligence. The fraudulent medicine never reached the market, potentially saving countless lives. Richard sold his stake in the pharmaceutical company and dedicated himself entirely to the foundation and the family he had almost lost. Clarice, though still facing physical recovery challenges, gradually returned to scientific activities, now focusing on transparency and medicine safety. Sophia returned to school, finally ready to reconnect with other children her age. Her scars, once a reason for isolation, became symbols of a story of courage that inspired others. And Irene, once invisible in the mansion's corridors, now led a team of researchers and lawyers dedicated to ensuring that science served life, not profit. On her desk, 2 photographs side by side. Julia at her graduation and Sophia on the day of the foundation's re-inauguration, 2 young women whose lives intertwined through fire and truth. In the family's new home, a smaller but infinitely more welcoming manor in Ascot, Sophia and Irene cultivated a medicinal herb garden, symbolically continuing Clarice and Julia's work. On a sunny afternoon, as they planted new seedlings, Sophia reflected, "You know, Irene, sometimes I think the fire that almost destroyed us ended up being what saved us. If it weren't for it, we would never have discovered the truth. We would never have found you." Irene smiled, adjusting the straw hat that protected her from the sun. "Fire has that power, little one. It destroys, but it also purifies. It reveals what is truly important. As that message I left for you said, fire reveals what gold tries to hide." Sophia nodded, observing the small plants that were beginning to grow, fragile but determined. "Like our scars," she completed, "they show where we were hurt, but also where we became stronger." That night, during family dinner, Clarice raised a toast. "To truth, which, like fire, can be painful, but always illuminates the path." "And to family," Richard added, looking fondly at the 3 women in his life, "which we find not only in blood but in the battles we fight together." As she observed the smiling faces around her, Sophia felt a peace she hadn't experienced since before the fire. The scars on her face no longer seemed so important. They were just marks of an extraordinary journey, a journey that began in the ashes of destruction and ended in the fertile garden of new beginnings. Because sometimes the greatest heroines don't wear capes. They wear scars, courage, and the unwavering determination to make the truth shine, even when the whole world seems to conspire to keep it in the shadows. End of story. Dear listeners, we hope Sophia, Irene, and Clarice's story has touched your hearts. To continue this emotional journey, we've prepared a special playlist with equally captivating and moving stories. Find it here by clicking the link on your left. If this story of courage, truth, and rebirth touched your soul, be sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video. Daily, we bring you new stories that explore the complexity of life and the power of human resilience. Share in the comments which moments moved you most in Sophia and her family's journey. We look forward to reading your impressions and continuing to move you with our narrative.